Hello and welcome to What Would Jesus Tech, a podcast devoted to imitating Jesus in a technological age. We're joined by Dr. Karen Swallow-Prior today. Karen is a distinguished author, cultural commentator, and literary scholar. Her writing has been featured in the New York Times, The Atlantic, First Things, the Gospel Coalition, Christianity Today, and more and more and more. I could go on. She wrote this book, The Evangelical Imagination, but today we are going to be talking about this book, You Have a Calling. Let's jump in. Hello and welcome to What Would Jesus Tech? Yes, it's the middle of summer, but sometimes books come out in the middle of summer and we just need to talk about them, which is what we're doing today. My name is Andrew Noble. I am a PhD student at the University of Nottingham, and I'm specializing in the overlap of technology and theology. I'm joined with my co-host, Austin Gravely, and he is the social media manager for the Gospel Coalition, as well as being very active in his local church. And we're here today to talk with Karen Swallow-Prior about her new book, You Have a Calling. And I was telling her before we hit record, she's like, I'm not a tech person. And I'm like, but you don't realize this is the kind of topic that comes up in tech circles all the time. I remember working in tech myself, and it was always this question of, is this my calling? Or should I change? And in the tech world, you change jobs every couple years. In fact, I remember one coworker saying to me, well, I haven't changed jobs in 3 years. I better change jobs just for the sake of my resume. Because there is that pressure to always be building your resume. So we need to think through this, and it is a little bit more complicated than just a single tweet. We need to talk about it. So Karen, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks so much for having me.
So do you have a calling? What's your calling?
Oh, we'll start right in, won't we? Well, first of all, I want to explain, and I make this a big point in my book, is that we all have multiple callings over the course of our lives and even in a single time. So we usually think about our calling or our vocation as our job, our paid work. I kind of break down all those categories because they are all different categories and sometimes overlap and some don't. But in this context, I would say that of your question, I would say that my calling, among others, is to teach. And so even as a writer, as a former classroom professor, as a speaker, I'm always coming from a posture of teaching, and that is my greatest spiritual gift, or one of them. And so, yeah, that's my calling to teach, and hopefully I can teach you a thing or two today.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and you already have through your book that we've both read. One of the ways that I've thought about calling, and still do to an extent, is this kind of idea of BOA, B-O-A, burden, opportunity, and affirmation. And it's kind of this idea of burden, some kind of desire, opportunity, it's out there, affirmation. And one of the things that's interesting about it is it's kind of like a leadership thing devoid of anything that's distinctly Christian. What would you say is Christian about calling that might be different than a secular idea of passion?
That's a great question, because I think everyone can think and be concerned about calling, whether coming from a Christian perspective or not. And again, in the book, the distinction that I make between calling and passion and other things is that calling comes from outside ourselves and passion comes from inside. Now, I think anyone could agree with that, because sometimes calling from outside ourselves means, hey, we get a call, we get a job interview, we get hired. That's a calling. Someone called us or emailed us or texted us. And that happens to us as Christians as well. But of course, we understand that the ultimate caller is God, and that he uses people and circumstances and our gifts and talents and many, many things for us to be called and find our calling. But the biggest difference, I think, that is helpful, especially as I'm drawing in this book on my decades of teaching college age students, even though it's not geared just toward them, but we are all living in the culture that they grew up in. And we have this wrong-headed idea, which is very damaging, I think, and a source of great disillusionment, that if we have a passion for something, we are to pursue it and we're going to make a lot of money. when we do. And sometimes that happens for some people, not, I don't know about that. I've just heard, but it very seldom happens. It's the exception, not the rule. And just sort of understanding that and laying a more realistic groundwork of understanding the difference between calling and passion and how they may or may not overlap, I think sets up our expectations to be more realistic.
Mm-hmm. No, I so appreciate. On page 73, you quote Oswald Chambers: "When we speak of the call of God, we are apt to forget the most important feature, the nature of the one who calls." And it kind of struck me that I've kind of lived in this secular leadership culture as opposed to a distinctly Christian understanding of calling. You're called to be a Christian, a mom, a dad, all sorts of things you're called to from outside yourself. And it's not simply internalized and then getting some affirmation about some desire you have. There's more to it than that. And it's almost more complicated. Like, going through your book, as I got into the definitions, it's like, wait, what does vocation mean? Like, can you unpack that for our listeners? Because I think this idea of vocation, it's not often used. We're normally talking about passion or some of these other words.
Yeah, so vocation is really a central doctrine of the Protestant Reformation and even later the Counter Reformation. And it's amazing to me that there are lots of books written on this, so I haven't invented any of this, but somehow in this particular cultural moment and in this moment in the church of, contemporary American evangelicalism, we have forgotten the very important doctrine of vocation. Now, through the book, I use the terms calling and vocation pretty interchangeably because they come from the same root word, which means calling, which goes back to, being called by someone. But vocation carries a lot more weight, and it goes back to the idea that before the Reformation, there was a sense that someone who had a vocation or a vocational call was someone who was called to serve in the church. Now, we still have that. Talk to any, pastor wannabe, and he's like, want to be a vocational minister. Great, but you can be a vocational anything pretty much. And so, but the reformers came along and said, there is no spiritual secular divide. There is no hierarchy of callings, and that someone can be called to be a mother, a father, a worker, a laborer, a priest, a nun, many, many things. And if God has called them to that and they are doing that, fulfilling that calling well, they are glorifying the Lord and serving the church and neighbor. And that is what Luther and other reformers pointed out, is that, God could have provided for us every day, as he did at one point in the Old Testament narrative, by bringing manna up on the floor, on the ground. He could have magically placed a roof over our heads every night and all these things, but he didn't do that. He uses calling and vocation for us to serve our neighbors. We need people who are going to grow the wheat and grind the mill. We need people who are going to deliver the bread to the store, the people who are going to teach, and the people who are going to, to put in the electricity in our homes. We need one another, and vocation, the theology of vocation, is one that understands how God uses our work to serve our neighbors and to steward creation well.
So good.
What would you say? What would you say? Because that's such a good list of all the ways, all the different vocations that we kind of take for granted, and things that we wouldn't consider vocations, but are actually really important. How do you think about vocation as we are starting to see AI really disrupt what vocations are even viable and possible, as we even in tech and outside of tech, as AI starts to offer a alternative, whether it's a good alternative remains to be seen. But you could hire a tutor to help you with your math or English, or you could just go to an AI. What would you say to vocation in the face of AI?
That is such an important question. Let me back up and give another definition, because again, I said there are these different categories, and there's overlap, and sometimes complete overlap, and sometimes no overlap in the categories. But vocation, again, in the modern world, we tend to think of vocation solely as that thing that we do that brings in money, that we support ourselves with, and often it is that. But vocation, and I use Elizabeth Gilbert's definitions in a short chapter on definitions. They're so helpful, and she's really not coming from necessarily a Christian perspective. But she talks about vocation as being the thing that we are, well, she says the universe, but yeah, that the universe calls us to, invites us to, or for whatever reason, we are going to do, whether we get paid for it or not, whether anyone applauds our efforts or not. That might mean that we have a day job, so that we can do that vocational thing on the side. It might, for her, it's writing. For many writers, we do that on the side, and other artists. And so in the context of a world where so many tasks that were once human tasks, and will always be human tasks in my view, but are being replaced by technology, then that does cause, I think, people to probably think about, well, what is their vocation? Because you can have the same job, get your same paycheck from the same employer, but still have a very different role and function.
Mm-hmm.
And that can happen to a lot of us in a lot of different contexts. And, it might be just, you might think of it as a word game, but it's more than that.
Right.
So we can think, well, okay, my vocation then maybe my vocation isn't to do the actual teaching face to face with the student, but my vocation is to allow this technology to do this well, to engineer it so that the same task is being accomplished, in, whether arguably a better way or not, but still
Right.
you could be fulfilling the same role, but through different technology.
Yeah, it's interesting to see how AI will eliminate just some things altogether, and some vocations that are very task heavy, and those tasks get entirely subsumed by AI, and those that the vocation is still necessary, but the task work itself
Right.
becomes more actual working hands on with AI than you did before. The vocation doesn't change, but how you fulfill that vocation is changing quite a bit.
Right. And I want to say something before we go too far into this conversation, because it's something that I have to make myself remember a lot, because I am very much a word person, a print person. I don't even have an e-reader.
What, you're not a Kindle? You're not a Kindle user?
I don't know. No, I am not. I probably
All right.
should. So I have my biases, and I have my, my preferences, but I have to remind myself that Plato, in one of his, Plato, sometimes he's being ironic and sometimes he's just pushing buttons, but in one of Plato's works, he talks about the technology of writing.
Mm-hmm.
And points out what a detriment the technology of writing will be to human memory and understanding.
Mm-hmm.
And then we come along, many years later, and we have the printing press. And the printing press, well, it changed the world forever. And it changed us, and here I am. I'm very happy to be in, a print culture.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm also living in a time where print culture is giving way to the digital age, and it's scary. And I don't necessarily like most of it, but I also think a lot of people were made nervous. Well, we know a lot of people were not only made nervous, but burned at the stake and beheaded because of the ideas circulated by the printing press. And so it was a tumultuous time. I'm glad for it. But the people who lived through that time had to wrestle with lots and lots of questions and effects of that new technology. And here we are.
I'd like to press on that, because that's something that I feel very much as well. You couldn't have described that any better. How do you personally navigate that as somebody whose vocational trade involves working with words? How do you personally navigate the fact that print culture is being upheaved again in ways that we didn't think were possible even 4 or 5 years ago?
Yeah, it's definitely a struggle. And so but again, I look at the history that I just described to remind myself that these kinds of tumultuous changes within human history are not new. They happen, not often, but they do happen. I happen to be living in this moment. And so, recognizing my age and average lifespan, I think, well, I won't live through whatever wild things are coming, and I'm kind of thankful for that. But I need to be a steward of what the print age brought and that I brought to it and that I have of it still. Well, but holding that loosely, understanding, I mean, I'm very anti AI and anti technology in a lot of ways. But I also recognize I don't understand it and I
Sure.
don't know what it will do, just as the people who were nervous about, like, can't we keep writing our manuscripts by hand instead of with printing press? I understand that there was nervousness at that time as well. And so it's recognizing who I am, the place that I'm in, what I've learned, what I can offer now, and holding it loosely and to know that the future will change,
Yeah.
and to support reading will always be important. Critical thinking will always be important. So I want to help people now who are dealing with these new technologies to, to hold on to and reclaim the best of print culture, and wish them well on what's ahead that I might not be around for.
Yes,
Yeah,
that's a great perspective.
I've recently been reading some of Marianne Wolf's books, so The Proust and the Squid, and she talks about the same Plato dilemma and the importance of reading physical books and all that. So it's funny hearing you're very cautious, because you wrote a book on reading well, and you go through virtue formation in that book. And so it's just interesting. You're being very cautious and nice to our tech heavy listeners, and saying that, yeah, but it's fair to push back to and to say we need to always be careful, no matter what technology. Are we growing in virtue? And that kind of, you can comment on that, but the other place I kind of want to go is, I mean, the title of the book, You Have a Calling, the subtitle, Finding Your Vocation in the True, Good, and Beautiful.
Yes.
I think figuring out how your job, so figuring out how my own job, how does it connect to what is true, what is good, and what is beautiful? You kind of talk about all truth is God's truth. We're ready to say that, but you also suggest and say and believe, and I agree with you, all goodness is God's goodness. All beauty is God's beauty. So when we pursue something and build something and work and serve in our vocations and callings and passions, whatever you want to call them, what is true, good, and beautiful, that's when we are doing something to reflect God as his images. I love that direction. I'm supposed to ask a question here, but I'll just stop there.
I'll come up with one. No. I want to tell a little story. I don't know if I've told this before, in an interview or even written it down. I've probably told it in person, but it serves as a little illustration, I think, of what the first part of what you started to say, which now I can't remember, but this story popped into my mind. Well, it's kind of holding on to the things that are important as things are changing, and especially about our humanity. And I remember when I was a young, newly completed PhD and got my first job, and I was talking with the wife of an older professor in my field, and so she just said to me, she said, well, my husband, he had to type his whole dissertation out on a typewriter, and you got to use a word processor. She said his was really hard. And I just thought, well, mine was hard too. But it was just an interesting, because I would not have wanted to write it out on a typewriter. And
that sounds awful.
It sounds awful. And I'm very thankful that I had a word processor. I guess we called it then. And so there was some truth in what she said, but the technological, so I want to say that technology allows, if we're bound by having to rip out a new sheet and start it all over again on the typewriter because we've struck out the line so much, we really can't think more and do more. We're not as freed up as we are to spend that time, doing more research and more refining. And so technology does allow us to be better at those things in terms of the that we have finite amounts of time and energy. And so we have to recognize what technology offers, but also that we don't want to lose that. And so that kind of gets to the truth, goodness, and beauty of it, right? And so again, I just want to keep putting that caveat out there that I'm suspicious of technology, not technology in general. I love heat and air conditioning. I'm suspicious of AI because I don't understand it. And the things that I read most are about the AI girlfriends and boyfriends and companions, the worst parts of it.
Serious issues.
Yeah, serious issues.
Yeah.
Right. And so I see those without necessarily understanding, the goodness that it can offer. But I believe it's there just because I got to use a word processor instead of a typewriter. And so when we think about calling, and this is really why I tied calling and vocation to truth, goodness, and beauty, because we do live in a changing world, and each one of us is experiencing changes in our own lifetimes, losses, shifts in our careers, our jobs, our vocations. We're living in a fraught political time. Many of us are losing friendships and church communities, and there's so much at stake. And so when we bring vocation and calling into it, it gets even more fraught with risk and uncertainty. And so my argument in the book is that if we keep our eyes on the pursuit of what is true and good and beautiful, we're going to find our calling along the way. We're going to be fulfilling what I think is our calling. I believe we are, as creatures made by the Creator God, who is the source of truth, goodness, and beauty. We are being like him, and we are pursuing him when we pursue these things. Now, what does that look like for each of us in our different daily callings and vocations? I give examples throughout the book. And I think especially when we're talking about AI, maybe the truth part of it is, the most important to think about. And that's the thing, as you said before, I say, Christians are really good at saying all truth is God's truth, but we don't think about the others. But in this context, we're going to have to start thinking in this post-truth culture, which is a word that, was word of the year a decade ago. So this has been a long time coming that we have lived in a post-truth culture, and we are questioning, not only our sources of authority, but even authority itself. And even Christians we don't have agreed upon authorities or sources of truth. And so truth is really going to be one of the important ones. And even something as simple, if I can be really practical, if, I did a column, an advice column in the current issue of Christianity Today when the question was about AI. And again, I tried not to be too dogmatic because I don't, there are better uses for it than I may know. But one of the things I pointed out is that in research and writing, you are supposed to always cite your sources, or it's plagiarism. And so that's a principle that doesn't change. Cite your sources.
Yes.
And so if you're using AI, will you cite it?
Yep.
And if you're hesitant to cite it, why? So to me, that's a principle that kind of, maintains whether throughout all of these conversations, and is one that we should, on Substack, there's some writers who want to put disclaimers that they don't use AI, and that's that's great. But if you do use AI, again, cite the source. Just like when you post a picture, you have to cite the source and have permission to cite the picture. So that's a practical example that I think of in terms of technology. I don't know if that's helpful or not.
No, it is. It's almost getting at the goodness of, like, when you are producing something and then you post it somewhere or give it to someone, is it a good product? Is it true? I think you have a turn of a phrase in one section where it's not about being true to yourself, it's being yourself truly, or truthfully, I think. And it's like, okay, there needs to be that truth, but also, like, is it good to lie? Is it good to deceive? Apple came out with those ads for their Apple Intelligence, and their example was someone who didn't do the reading prior to the meeting, and then all of a sudden they use AI to, be up to date and summarize what they've read. And that's deceptive. That's inherently evil. It is not pursuing goodness. And so I think it's really important to think about, all three of these things. I think beauty is perhaps the most neglected when we think about it. We can kind of think about a carpenter making something that's good, a sturdy building, strong architecture. That's important. We can think about that in varying fields. I've learned throughout my life, you need to put a diaper on properly. You can't slack with that. Is the diaper on? Yes, it's on. That's truthful, but that's not, I didn't do a good enough job. I really
and so
need
your
to
home
do
did
that.
not maintain its beauty for a little while there.
That's right.
Indeed.
That's right. They all relate to each other, as you say. So what does it look like to pursue beauty? And I know you don't know maybe the whole world of working in tech, but sometimes when you're writing code, you're just trying to make a product work. You're and in some of these tech organizations, you're one amongst thousands. You're just doing your little thing. I remember talking to someone being like, "Oh, do you deal with this issue at your company?" He's like, "I just write surveys to see how customers are appreciating our product or not." Like, is there beauty in that? Like, how do you pursue beauty in that? You're just writing survey questions.
Yeah. And so, because beauty is so hard to grasp, and it's so big and so expansive. I just went to a couple of sort of objective qualities about beauty that I think helps us to think more concretely about it. And I went to who else but St. Thomas Aquinas. And so he famously identifies the properties of beauty. Well, first of all, he says beauty is something that upon being seen gives pleasure. And he's talking about the visual aspects of beauty. And so, but we can think about that metaphorically. And that's why I open the chapter saying that beauty attracts, it draws us. Now, again, of course, we all know our sense of beauty can be distorted and corrupted.
Yes.
And so that is true, but still there is good true beauty, and we do have the ability to be drawn to it and attracted to it because by its very nature that's what it does. And so Aquinas says, okay, well, what is beautiful? And he says beautiful things have integrity, proportion, and luminosity. And you can think of a painting and you can see, oh, okay, yeah, a beautiful painting is going to have those things. But let's think about the coding, which I know nothing about, but we'll still think about it. So if and math is another thing closely related to your field that I don't know anything about, but you know of people who will talk about like a beautiful equation or a beautiful solution because it's elegant and symmetrical and balanced and maybe clean and neat as opposed to convoluted. I am only imagining, but I imagine in coding and even writing surveys, you can do things that are symmetrical and balanced and clear. They have clarity. As a user of many websites and these kinds of things, I mean, we all know that you can go to one and the way it's set up can be easy to navigate or difficult to navigate. And those things really matter to our lives. They really do. And so to bring that kind of integrity, proportion, and illumination to the survey, to the code, to the process, making it simpler and clearer. I think because simplicity and clarity are forms of beauty, that they're not the only forms, but we don't want Baroque coding, I don't think. And so thinking about beauty metaphorically that way, of like, what are the qualities of something that's visually or auditorily beautiful, and how can I translate that to the work that I'm doing? I think there are lots of ways we can do that if we're just kind of thinking about it.
Yeah, in the marketing world, in the marketing world, beauty manifests itself not only just in terms of what you're making, but how you make it. And one of the lines that I use with my team at TGC is start with your destination and then work backwards from how you get there. And we take a lot of pride in building good workflows. A good workflow to getting a task done is a very beautiful thing. And it actually serves your neighbors, it serves your coworkers well when you have good workflows that are clear and explainable as to how you're doing what you're doing. It's not going to hang in a museum or anything like that. It's not that type of beauty, but it's beautiful in that it's effective stewardship of your work. It serves your coworkers, and it ultimately serves the people that you're called to serve because it results in good work being done consistently and well.
Yeah, and that's an application of beauty. Absolutely.
Mhm.
I wanted to talk though about beauty, is especially as our sense of beauty can be twisted and tainted, especially since you worked with college students for so many years. I have a background in youth ministry, and I'm actually getting ready to go back into a youth ministry context. And we know that teenagers and young adults can have very strange tastes of what they think is beautiful or pleasurable, or even the passions that they have. What would you say if you were counseling a young adult whose passion has been kind of bored from the internet and internet culture? Like their passion is like they want to go be a real big YouTube influencer, or they want to go be a content creator in some just not exactly sinful, but certainly just kind of a questionable use of time. How would you navigate someone with someone's that's their passion, they want to make that their vocation or their calling because it's their passion, and redirecting that to something different?
Okay, so that's a great question, and it actually, like, I would hand them my book and say, "Here."
Sure.
And I would first of all say that there are going to be people who are genuinely called to do something
Yes,
like that.
absolutely.
Right. So let's, just like there are people who are genuinely called to be NFL stars, but those are, not very many among all those
No,
who
there's
play
not.
college football, right? And so I would do, to kind of back up and get a little bit, do more of the philosophy and theology behind that. And I say this in the book, I would say our passions and our desires and even our tastes are much more culturally formed than we think of. And of course, I've read a lot of James K.A. Smith. He's very influential. So if you know that name,
Yes, absolutely.
he talks about how our culture, our practices, our habits form us, our desires, such that we actually think they came from us, when in fact, and I can't remember if I use this example in the book or not. I'll just pull one out. But like someone 200 years ago would never have had the burning desire to be a YouTuber.
Right.
Because it didn't exist. And so that's obvious, but keep narrowing that in. And we really are, our desires and our visions and our hopes, our visions of the good life are formed by the world around us, and even our passions and desires. Now, recognizing that, so that we can actually develop other passions and desires through exposure to other cultures and habits and practices. But the other end of it is sort of the reality and the truth of the thing itself. And so again, becoming a star of any kind in any form, any kind of work, requires the reality check of, well, how many people do actually make it, and how many, how realistic, how sustainable is this idea? And then the additional reality check of the truth of yourself. Do you have the skills and the abilities and the aptitude for this? And for young people, and even older people, oftentimes we don't even know what we have aptitude for. We have to learn and figure it out. And that's why the role of other people in our lives, in our community, is so important. We have an obligation to each other to affirm. This goes back to BOA, I think you said earlier, right? To affirm what we see in others, and to sometimes defirm. I don't know what dissuade. Like you're really not
Good
that good at that.
Good friends do that.
I give that the example in my book of as soon as I showed an interest in wanting to play the piano when I was 5 years old, my parents were on it, like piano lessons for years. And it was a long time later when I realized I am not good at this. Nobody told me. I was just like, I am not good at this. I'm going to stop wasting anyone's time and money. The teachers weren't going to tell me because they're getting paid.
Right.
Right.
They have a vested interest in keeping you going.
Right. And my parents, I don't know that. They were just leaving it up to me. And so I figured it out myself that I wasn't good at it and decided to pursue other things that I was better at. And so that's just life. But we have an important role to play in other people's lives as we help them figure out what they're good at, what they might be called to, and maybe what they should never do.
Right. How would you counsel someone on the flip side of that, where people are affirming that they may have a calling to something that they may not have a passion for, that their passion or their desire is in one direction, but externally they're being practically called in a different direction, and it's not a direction that they want to go in. How would you counsel
Yeah,
someone
no,
about
I
that?
mean that's a very common situation in the world, the modern world, I think, and we have to be wise. I cite a classic little book by Gary Friesen, "Decision Making and the Will of God," where he
Hmm.
talks about, God doesn't have a perfect blueprint for our lives. His
Yes.
His will for us is in the Bible, and then beyond that,
Right.
it's all open. And so we do need to listen to those things that people say we might be called to, but we do need to listen to who we are so that we can be truly ourselves. But we also need to realize, and I butt against this in the book, like pursuing your passion is not the wisest way to go about things. It can be
Hmm.
part of the equation, but it's not the whole equation. And there are a number of reasons for it. But one of the reasons is, and I cite Cal Newport here, who does a lot of research in
Yes.
this area, that he talks about the craftsman mindset versus the passion mindset. And what he means by that is the idea that when you do something for a long time and you get good at it, you are treating that work as a craft and you're doing good work. That's more serves the world better. And then
Yes.
he cites in a different part, he also has research that shows that when you do something long enough and you become competent at it and confident in it, guess what? You get passionate
You
about it.
do.
You do.
Hmm.
And
You
so
do.
passion follows competence in his formulation. And again, none of these things I'm saying are universally always true, but
Right.
they're just
Yes.
different pieces, different ways of thinking about it, because we should just not blindly follow the whole pursue your passion thing and
Yes.
you'll never work a day in your life. And that's kind of what my whole book is trying to to counter.
Yeah.
Hmm.
The whole notion of you'll never work a day in your life is not only is it just unrealistic, like it actually is miserable. Like when you talk to people who
Mm-hmm.
can't work or for whatever reason
Yep.
are not able to work and they're not
Yep.
happy, they're
Right.
miserable
Right.
because there's a sense of purpose that comes from
Mm-hmm.
being able to do something and do it well. And when you
Mm-hmm.
can't do that, it's miserable.
Mm-hmm. And that's why my first chapter in the book, after the introduction, I have the whole chapter is about work and how good
Hmm.
work is. God made
Yeah.
us to work with Him, to be His co-laborers, his co-workers, his co-stewards of this creation. That's what we were made to do. And even the things that we enjoy that are fun, we have to work at them
Right.
in order for them to
Hmm.
be fun.
But even fun things, I mean, it's like sugar and candy. Too much of a good thing, and it doesn't
Right.
become good anymore. If you just pursue your passions, if you just pursue having fun all the
Right.
time, it actually ruins the fun. It actually makes the
Exactly.
thing not enjoyable anymore.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's this really tricky balance because I have talked to different people. I remember talking to one guy. He was like 19. He's like, I want to go into marketing. I want to do this. And I'm like, okay, where are you at now? And we just talked through different elements, and it just felt complicated to advise him one way or the other. It's like he wanted me to give a direct answer, but I felt like I couldn't.
Hmm.
And similarly, in your book, in one part, you talk about the necessity of moving sometimes. Like
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
sometimes you actually need to leave your church. And I
Mm-hmm.
remember reading that and being like, oh, not always though. And then I read the next sentence and it's like, not always, like you add the caveats, they're necessary. But sometimes you actually do need to leave your job. You actually do
Yes.
need to
Mm-hmm.
leave your
Mm-hmm.
church,
Mm-hmm.
like,
Yes.
yes, you might've been called by God to that for a season. So how do you know when to switch? I mean, that's like read the whole book again to answer that question. But yeah, how do you know when it's just not a good fit anymore in one spot or place in your
Yeah.
life?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I mean, to be totally transparent, in my own life, I'm a slow quitter, slow leaver. And so sometimes I can look back and think, well, I should have left
Sure.
earlier,
Yeah.
right? And so, we can be too quick to do it as well. And in the context of work, and it was interesting you said in your profession people they're expected to leave a lot, and that's fine, that makes sense. But I think we're in a culture where that's so expected in so many disciplines that we've actually lost a sense of how much goodness can come from simply staying. and being in a place for a long time. And the example that I drew from there, and again, this is just an example and it's not true in all things, but just something else to think about. My husband's a public school teacher, so he's in education, and I hope nobody from his school is listening to this, but anyway, but it's, likely not.
Chances are low.
It's like the administrators are playing musical chairs all the time. Like they're moving up or moving down or moving sideways. And so, for various reasons. And so the continuity that just brings some stability to the teachers and to the students in the classrooms is gone. We're missing that. Now, maybe there are other advantages that come, but stability, consistency, experience, history are all missing when everyone's moving around all the time. Like the teachers are all there for years and years, and the administrators who make the decisions come and go, and it's there's a lot that's lost because of that. But when we're talking about something that is unhealthy or hindering, I mean, clearly that's a time to go if you can. I mean, I don't, when we're talking about work, you really probably in most cases need to make sure you have something else to go to before you leave. And in church life, I mean, it's not an easy answer. I guess I would rather stay longer than leave sooner. But again, I think we have to be in community too, even not just the church community. We have to we have to seek wise godly counsel. And then I will also go back to the Gary Friesen thing, which, that, as long as we're not stepping into sin or acting sinfully, which again, that's hard to not do, but there is freedom. It's not just like there's one choice ahead of us, and if we choose wrongly, we get the big cosmic buzzer, we're out. Mm-hmm. God will use it all. It goes back to what Austin said earlier. It's not just what we do, it's how we do it. We might make a decision that we could have made better. We might do something that a different decision might have been better, but God's going to use it all if we're pursuing him, if we are pursuing the true, the good, the beautiful, over the course of the trajectory of our continuing to journey on. He will use it all and sometimes bring us back or use it all for his good. And so we just have to be mindful of that and not acting out of the wrong things, selfish ambition or greed or pride or a desire to platform ourselves or
No, so there's a lot of anxiety in the modern age, and you're basically speaking against that and saying, no, trust God with your day, give it to God. Was there goodness in your day that you pursued? Was there truth? Was there beauty? And I think it's so hard, and you kind of talk about this. It's something that I almost want to push back gently or question. You didn't have space in the book. It's not a long book. It's very readable. This is a kind of book you can give to a teenager and get into. Mm-hmm. So maybe this is just something, and I think you even got it in a footnote where you talked about, it's a lot more complicated than I have space to address here, which was about a different thing. But so here's my question for you. Is it the fault of the Protestant work ethic that we're experiencing a lot of modern anxiety? Because you kind of go into that on one page of the book and you talk about that, and I'm like, but what about like the whole buffered self of Charles Taylor, like this idea that we're just we have all these freedom and options now, and now we're we lose our stability because we have so much choice. It's freedom everywhere. It's choose your own adventure every day. New job this, new job that. New technology means I might not be in this job. I need to learn this latest technology so I need to be an expert on something brand new now. There's no stability, and so we have all this anxiety. I don't want to blame the Protestant Reformation and their view of vocation for that. Like, you kind of do blame the Protestant. You say it's not the only cause, but it seems like there's a lot of other factors influencing that, and maybe you'd agree. What do you think?
I'm trying to remember exactly how I put that. So it is, but I will also say that the Protestant Reformation is well, it's a chicken and egg kind of thing, but it's also
Right.
it's modernity. Yeah. It's modernity. It's because of modernity.
Yes.
That's my answer to everything. It's because of modernity, isn't it? So I will say that, and again, this is the thing that I just gives me the sort of the most perspective on all of these big questions, is it's always about the excess, right? And so I tell my students all the time, human history is a history of pendulum swings from one extreme to another.
Yes.
Action, reaction, and we go too far. And so we are in an age of late modernity. And so we are seeing the excesses of modernity, which includes this, the Protestant work ethic gone wild, perhaps. I mean, one of the points that I say in the book is that I think a gift that the millennials and youngers have given us is to recognize that perhaps we haven't placed enough of an importance on work-life balance.
Yes.
Like, people mock that, but that it's really important. It's very true. Whatever word or phrase you want to use for it, balance is important. And so, so that the younger generations are kind of bringing us back to, I think, a better sense of living a more holistic, proportionate life, which is part of beauty. And so we are in this place where we have so many choices and so much anxiety. It's a product of the age. It's a product of modernity, a product of the Protestant Reformation. I don't necessarily want to, I definitely don't want to go back. I'm thankful, right? No, I don't want to go back. But if we can recognize this moment that we're in, that has, the pendulum is swung way over to one side, and begin doing some of the slow, gradual corrections and adjustments, then we'll be perfect and the problems will be solved. But that won't happen. All we can do is to quote, really quote the Bible, but quote the right wing on social media all the time. We just need to know the times or read the time, whatever.
Right. Yeah.
But we do
know what time it is.
You know what time it is. Thank you. We do need to know the times, and we need to know our place in it, and that helps set before us the task we are to do. We're to correct the particular errors in our own age. Other ages will come along and have their errors of ours that they need to correct.
No, you're totally right. There's a pendulum swing, and work was absolutely an idol. And if a lot of people my age in their 30s or 40s are thinking about their parents' generation and how much their parents worked and what that did to them growing up, I know people in their 70s that I've talked to about this, and they regret deeply how much they worked instead of taking care of their children and having time for that. So it is absolutely a pendulum swing. So I agree with you. I don't think we're on a different page.
I will take the side effects of the Protestant work ethic over the two-tiered system of medieval monasticism any day of the week.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, for sure.
I would have made a great nun. No, not really.
I did the modern equivalent in working for a church camp for several years, which is basically just Baptist monastery life. It's pretty close. I don't want it again.
Well, Karen, this has been an excellent conversation and an excellent book. I really enjoyed it personally. I'm myself trying to go through some of the adding and subtracting of responsibilities in my life as I'm going through a PhD. I'm like, oh, that's the big rock that I'm going to have in my life. But when you start doing that, you're like, well, are you publishing papers yet? Are you writing this? And oh, here's an opportunity should you go about and doing this. And so it was helpful even just for me personally to think about this and just not be so anxious. I think that it just kind of comes back to that for me personally, is that an anxious and a sense of, am I justified, a self-justification that always seeps in. I know I'm justified by Christ, but sometimes I want to look back in my day and say, did I get enough done in order to be worthy? And that's not really how the Bible sees it, not really how vocation works. So thank you for writing this book. What's your next project?
Yeah, well, I am. The next project is still formulating in my mind. I want to return to my first love, which is literature. So that's what I'm thinking of for my next project, but I don't want to say more than that. I am weekly writing on my Substack newsletter, and I do a few different things there and mix it up. But the ongoing thing is doing a survey of British literature, and we're in the 17th century now. And so anybody wants to go and read about Beowulf or Chaucer or George Herbert or John Donne or John Milton or any of those guys, we've been kind of doing a slow read through a lot of those works. And that's been a way for me to fulfill my calling as a lover of literature and a lover of teaching literature in a different form than I have for, the most of my life. And it's been beautiful, and I'm enjoying it. And I invite anyone to come journey along with us.
Awesome. Well, we will link to that for sure in the show notes, so you can scroll down and click there, or just Google search and you'll probably find it.
I am thankful for Google and all the techies who brought us Google. Thank you.
Yes, for sure. For sure. We should use tech. We should also find rest. We should glorify God. That's our tagline. So thank you for listening to What Would Jesus Tech, encouraging all of us to reflect God, reflect Jesus, the image of God perfectly. He was the perfect image. We do it imperfectly, but we do it as best we can as we try to pursue the good, the true, and the beautiful. Thanks for joining us, Karen, and take care, everybody.